These hills have been home to Cherokee or pre-Cherokee peoples for many thousands of years. No one knows for sure when the first people came, but over the centuries, numerous Native American tribes developed, with more than 14 tribes located in South Carolina when DeSoto visited the Southeast in 1539. The Cherokee resided in the hills and valleys of the upstate, in what became known as lower towns. People lived and loved and raised families just as we do today. But the tools they used and the landscape around them were quite different.
People don't have a reference of what it was like many, many years ago before European settlers came.
In South Carolina, in Allendale County on the Savannah River at the Topper site, they have found a site and they've actually dated it to about 40,000 or older, which would indicate that there could very well have been humans right here in North America, before that last push of that big glacier. And you have to understand this too, as the glacier retreated, the people were not in the northeast. They had to be, farther south of that. So people that were below the glacier obviously would have migrated north, and then leaving people that, stayed in this area.
But it was much more arid during that period because most of the water supply was tied up in the glacier. The glacier was 2 or 3 miles thick. People don't understand how much water was tied up in the glaciers. So while we see very dense forest here in the south, that wasn't the case. It was fairly open, and maybe an example would be more like out west where you see the trees and vegetation growing in the cove areas and the ridges would be barren or more of a prairie type. When they came on, they learned that fire was a very important tool to keep vegetation down so they could walk easily. They also used fire to clear areas. Later on, they got better and better at understanding this over several thousand years to actually take the more fertile land and use crops as they got to a certain point a few thousand years ago, when the population in the South was as much as 2 million people, I understand.
In broader terms, this is what archaeologists would call Mississippian. And Mississippian is found not all of eastern North America, but certainly throughout the southeast. And it begins to develop around 900 AD, reaches its culminations just before or at the time of the DeSoto Entrada in the mid-16th century. And these are the most highly developed Aboriginal cultures that existed in the southeastern United States. These are the cultures where, for the most part, people lived in large villages. Generally, these villages had a mound. Some of them had multiple mounds. Then they would have a big plaza area where public ceremonies were conducted. And then around that there would be, anywhere from, say, 50 to 100 houses maybe. And then some of them, many of them had a palisade around them.
An abundance of rivers and streams provided fish, caught by spearing or in fish weirs. Primitive tools like the atlatl and blowpipe were used to hunt a variety of wild game. The fields created by the Cherokee were large and located in the best bottomland. In addition to the 3 sisters of corn, squash, and beans, there were plum and peach orchards.
Corn agriculture dates from about 900 AD. Corn was here in the southeast probably maybe even up to 1,000 years earlier than that, but it wasn't until about 900 that people really focused on corn.
It was the women who took care of the agricultural fields for the most part. I mean, everybody turned out to till the fields and get ready for the spring planting. Once that was done, it was the woman's to take care of.
In Cherokee society, and there's very good historic record of this, Cherokee women seem to have played had the ability to play a much greater role in socio-political kinds of activities. So Cherokee women, if you will, seem to have enjoyed a bit more freedom and had a bit more political and social influence in Cherokee culture probably than did Creek women in their societies.
The man married the woman. He went to live with the woman's family as opposed to living in his family. They became his relatives, and his children became their descendants, not from his parents' side.
There's an extensive record of trade really throughout most all of the prehistory of the Southeast. So trade goes back thousands and thousands of years, and in some periods, trade was rather extensive. And if you sort of look at a map of the United States today, and you look at the interstate system, and the interstate system, for the most part, follows the Indian trails that were there for surely thousands of years.
Native Americans used trail trees to mark the direction of paths, bending saplings in the desired direction, and as it grew, it held its shape. There are numerous trail trees still in the forests of the upstate.
When Columbus came, there was a very viable population of Native Americans, and as they and other explorers came, they brought diseases that the Indians hadn't incurred before, smallpox and the venereal diseases and just all kinds of different things that spread through the population of Native Americans. They had no immunity to it. And the statistics are that it devastated the population 90 to 95%. Now, I'm going to repeat that, 90 to 95%, because that was devastating to any population.
When the colonists turned to slavery as a means of cultivating large plantations, there was an attempt to enslave Native Americans. But colonists quickly learned that Native Americans could easily slip away and disappear, whereas the African American slaves didn't have the survival skills to live off the land and couldn't make their way home again. Battles between tribes weren't anything new to Native Americans, but the Cherokee had a concept of balance that required like restitution for an offense. They called it counting coup, or basically an eye for an eye. They would never wipe out an entire village because that invited the relatives to come and wipe out their village. When the Native Americans saw the French and British approach to war, it forever changed that concept and cost them dearly. Siding with the British during the Revolutionary War, the Cherokee signed a treaty under the Treaty Oak, giving up their claim to lands east of a boundary that ran across the top of Oconee Mountain. But many Cherokee families chose to stay in the hills of the upstate and live alongside arriving settlers. Over the next couple hundred years, Cherokee in the upstate of South Carolina lived next door to settlers, intermarrying, raising families, and adapting. The events of the Trail of Tears did not directly affect Native Americans living in this area, but word of the devastation and horror of that experience came from relatives and friends, and served as an encouragement to downplay or hide their Native American background in an effort to fit in.
I wanted to come back to learn the stories of respect to teach my children. Grandma didn't know those. She didn't care to be anything except like everybody else. I wasn't like everybody else. In one way, because I always asked too many questions. Hey, what did we do back in the day? And who is this relative? And what did they do? And all those kinds of things. And I was told to hush, puppy, because I asked things that brought up old family hurts. And I think that's like a lot of people. We were told not to talk about things because you never knew when the government would come maybe and take your children away, because that was legal back in the day up until the 70s. So some of the people just said nothing. You don't want that to happen to your children or your grandchildren. So a lot of the elders didn't teach the language to their children because you had lye soap back in the day, and they would wash your mouth out with a lye soap for speaking your own language, and that's the only language you knew. So you grew up being very silent for a very long time until you could speak English well.
Fortunately, today things are changing, and Native American culture in South Carolina is honored. Research is ongoing to learn as much as possible about the lives and practices of earlier peoples as a way to understand our heritage. Many, perhaps most, current South Carolina residents have some Native American connection, either from ancestors who were Native American or because of the influence of Native Americans on where we live. In the upstate, many towns, lakes, and rivers have Cherokee names. Oconee County is named after the local Cherokee village, Oconee.
I'm proud of my heritage. I had a good life out of being a Native American. I had a hard life now. Everything was tight. We didn't have the things a lot of other people had. Went through depression, and depression was rough. I think it's getting more stabilized than what it was, because we can go where we want to go and do what we want to do, and we can be a part of it if we want to be.
As we better understand the past and value the cultural diversity of our land, perhaps we will come to value each other while respecting our differences.
So we can take some of the old things and bring them into the modern and still retain the spirit, the essence of what the one who made us all wants us all to do. They just get along with each other. Allow each other to be without violence. So I tell my kids, take what you can from the heart of a friend, and with a breath of kindness, blow the rest away. But when you blow, don't spit.